welcome back to Angela's Tip Corner. Today I'm going to be making chocolate chip cookies and discussing the age-old question, to sift or not to sift. Now this recipe I'm using today calls for 5 sifted cups, which means I need to sift my flour first and then pull my 5 cups. Now if it said 5 cups sifted, you would measure your 5 cups and then sift. And a couple items you can use if you don't have one of these nifty little doodads to sift your flour. Just a regular old mesh strainer will work just as well. You put it in and you just tap it and it sifts it pretty quickly actually. You also want to, when you're making cookies, make sure you cream your butter and your sugar until it's nice and light and fluffy. That's going to give you a better consistency on your cookie. So let's get started. Now, I've got everything measured out. It's always good to do that because that way you don't forget anything. And I went ahead and started my butter a little bit just to get it loosened up a little before I added in my sugars. And you always want to start off slow so that it doesn't kick up at you. And you want to keep an eye on it. You want to make sure that it's well incorporated as well as light and fluffy. You don't want to just go until it's mixed because your cookie's going to end up very grainy and a little bit hard. All right, it looks like I'm good to go, so now I'm going to add my eggs one at a time. And it's always good to pre-crack your eggs into a separate container. That way, if you end up getting some shell in there, it's a lot easier to get shell out of this than it is out of the cookie mix. And instantly you're going to start to see your dough is already going to be nice and light and fluffy, and it's going to make a wonderfully delicious chewy cookie. Now I'm going to slowly pour my vanilla in. Okay, now that that's all incorporated, I'm going to take a minute and scrape my bowl, and we'll be right back. And now we're getting ready to add the flour to our wet mixture. Now, I took my salt and my baking soda, and I went ahead and mixed it in with my flour. That's going to give you a better distribution and give you a more even cookie. If you don't mix them together, you could end up with salty spots, or you could have one area that's got all your baking soda or baking powder, depending on the recipe. And that doesn't taste very good either. And then the other parts of the cookie will be super flat. So now once again, we're going to start low and slow, especially with all this flour in here. You can end up with a nice big dust cloud in your face if you turn it on full speed. All right. Now, as for chocolate chip ratio, you can always go by whatever recipe you're using, whatever it says. But feel free to add more or less. It just really depends on your preference. Me, I like to go a little bit more. I like the chocolate. All right, before we add our chocolate chips, we're going to go ahead and give the bowl one last good scrape, and that way if there's any pockets of flour or anything that you've missed, this will pick it up. It looks pretty good, so now chocolate chips. And you're just going to fold these in just until you get a pretty decent, even distribution. All right, now we're ready to scoop. Generally, I like to buy parchment paper. It actually saves a lot on cleanup. You just put a piece on your pan, lightly spray it with some pan spray, and you're good to go. Also, if you want even cookies, you can scoop them out by hand with the spoon, but I like to use a 1 ounce cookie scoop. That way all my cookies end up exactly the same size, and nobody can bicker over whose cookie's bigger than whose. Just try and flatten it as best you can on the side of the bowl if you're using one of these. And always remember, no matter how much or how little you're making, always start with the 4 corners of your parchment paper if you're using parchment first, because you don't want this to fly up while it's baking, because then whatever it covers won't bake, or if you have a convection oven, it might blow your cookies off the cookie sheet altogether. I've had that happen a time or two in my oven. It was a very sad day in the kitchen. And then depending on what your recipe calls for, will depend on if you do this next step or not. Mine, I flatten my cookies just a little bit this way. The middle cooks evenly and you don't end up with super hard crunchy edges and pretty raw in the middle. It'll give you a nice even bake. And you're just a little bit, you don't want to go really flat because then you will have hockey pucks when they cook, which is good for dunking in milk, but when you're looking for a nice chewy cookie, not so great. All right, I'm gonna go pop these in the oven and I'll be right back. All right, and here's our finished product. As you can see, very lovely color, very even cookie. And the best part, look at how soft that is. Thanks for watching. Until next time.